Hi, I'm Dirk Lohan, architect and grandson of Mies van der Rohe, and you are listening to U.S. Modernist Radio.
Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Welcome to U.S. Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. I'm Tom Guild. This week marks the close of a highly regarded exhibition at the National Building Museum in Washington, D.C. It's called Capitol Brutalism, the history of D.C.'s best modernist buildings. We'll hear all about it today with Executive Director Aileen Fuchs and Head Curator Angela Pearson. Heading to California, we'll hear what happened to a couple who went all in on Prefab, which is great, but then their Prefab company went belly up, which is not. Later on, special musical guest Madeleine Peyroux dances us to the end of love. And now, here's your host, the voice of reason in a sea of wishful thinking, Mr. Modernism, George Smart.
Hey, thanks, Tom. Here's a little ditty about Jack and Diane. They've been together a long time now, ever since the 80s, when those Bobby Brooks slacks went their own way. A great marriage, good jobs, 3 wonderful kids, and a beautiful modernist house they inherited 20 years ago from her parents. Now it's time to sell and downsize, so they get the best modernist realtor in town, a former architect, who knows how these houses are put together and, most importantly, what they're worth. Realtor Liz does her due diligence, gets comps, visits other houses by that architect, looks at past sales, market trends, interest rates, talks to neighbors, and considers all the elements that made this house charming and welcoming for decades. Like most mid-century houses, it needs work, but it's certainly far from a teardown. So Liz presents a thoughtful, carefully researched price, $1.2 million. She can get that deal to close, no problem. But Diane clutches her huge Edith head glasses and declares to a bewildered realtor that this house is not just special, it's an experience. Ooh. Her intuition says it's worth at least $2 million. Jack is convinced the cherry cabinetry is worth $250,000 just by itself, and the peeling linoleum and faint aroma of cat are minor compared to the good vibrations in the house. Did you know it was featured in House Beautiful? An hour later, Liz, badly outgunned, prices it at $2 million. There are 3 showings in 6 weeks in a neighborhood where appropriately priced houses that never appeared in House Beautiful sell well. After 12 weeks and 0 offers, Jack and Diane grudgingly agree to a mere $25,000 price reduction, muttering about how the universe is testing their resolve. They insist the right buyer will feel the energy, just walk in, and immediately know. Now, Jack and Diane, like many sellers, operate on this mystical plane, kind of like ValueJet, beyond the realities of supply, demand, and structural integrity. After 18 weeks, they call Liz in and criticize her for, quote, not doing enough. After 26 weeks, with no offers and only 8 showings, they fire Liz.
Bye, Liz.
And a year later, they sell the house for $1.2 million. The moral here, Jack and Diane are not helping themselves by unrealistic pricing based on feelings. When you hear your agent give that diplomatic sigh of empathy and utter despair over and over, it's time to get real. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Brutalism, those inspiring concrete temples we love, is having a bad year. Accused of everything from being cold, as in the vibe, to un-American, everything from bureaucratic to communist to fascist, brutalist structures are the target of organized, well-funded efforts by the National Civic Arts Society. Then there's the movie about this type of architecture, conveniently named The Brutalist, which clocks in at an unbearable 3 hours and ends with the architect getting sexually assaulted. Yikes! The good news is that for the last 12 months, the good folks at the National Building Museum have mounted one of their largest exhibitions ever. It focuses on the merits of 7 Washington-area brutalist buildings, plus the D.C. metro system, plus impressive plans for how to fix them up. However, the wildly successful exhibition closes in a week, so you gotta move fast. The show has gotten rave reviews. CBS Saturday Morning noted how the city's much-maligned concrete beacons of brutalism are getting a fresh look.
The Washington Post called it a fascinating, sometimes tongue-in-cheek look at brutalism's evolution in the Capitol.
Bloomberg City Lab highlighted its provocative solutions for some of the city's least understood buildings. We've got 2 people today who can help us understand brutalism. With a master's from New York University,
Go Violets!
Our first guest is Aileen Fuchs, President and Executive Director of the National Building Museum. We also have the co-curator of the exhibition, a professor at the University of Oklahoma Gibbs School of Architecture.
Go Sooners!
She's Angela Pearson. Welcome, Aileen and Angela.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So, Aileen, before we talk about architecture, I understand you make a mean drink called the Pensioner's Punch. What is in that?
Oh my goodness. I didn't know we were going in this direction. I'm so pleased. Yes. I mean, how's one going to get through NYU grad school without doing a little bartending and mixologing? So
Yeah.
yes, sir. Pensioner's Punch is really just to take on like a really great rum punch with lovely bitters and nutmeg. I got a bunch up my sleeve.
Well, what makes it special?
What makes the punch special?
Yeah.
I think the fresh lime, the aromatics of a nutmeg. It has both like winter quality and a summer quality. It's all of those things. And we name it after our commissioner, our pension suite in the National Building Museum, which by original design was the Pension Bureau of the United States.
Now, a lot of people have never been to the National Building Museum, which is a wonderful structure. As you said, it used to be the government's pension offices. How did that building come about, and when did it change over to be a museum?
Yeah, our building was, I think, completed in 1883 and designed as the original, pension bureau of our nation that now desperately needed to disperse pensions to many, many Civil War soldiers. And it went through a series of really interesting iterations as DC was finding its footing, and then found itself at a place, in the 1970s where there was considering maybe it should tear down. And a group of people came together and said, wait a minute, no, this is a National Historic Landmark, the largest interior Corinthian columns in the world at its time of being built. It's an absolutely, utterly awe-inspiring building to all ages. And so luckily it was saved and established. We are chartered by Congress to be the nation's museum for architecture, design, and construction. And as I like to say, for how to design and build, but how to design and build a better world.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, Angela, you're at Oklahoma, which has sort of been a hotbed of modernism. You've done extensive research on Bruce Goff. And of course, here in Raleigh, our very own Henry Campheffner came here in 1948 to start the School of Architecture from Oklahoma. What's going on there at the campus now? What's going to be the next big thing in modernism coming out of Oklahoma?
Oh, that's a great question. And I'm so glad that you mentioned Bruce Goff, and also you started to gesture toward what we call our American School of Architecture. And so for folks who are listening who might not be familiar with the American School, you might have heard of, the Sarasota School or the Palm Springs School, but we call the American School what emerged in Oklahoma in the late 40s and 50s under the leadership of Bruce Goff, Herb Green, and others. We're continuing to have exhibitions and work that really elaborates on this legacy. Right now, we have a brand new exhibition up about the legacy of Jim Fox, a North Carolina-based architect.
Oh, really? You've got a Jim Fox exhibition?
Wow.
Oh, my God. I did not know this.
Yes. His grandson, Joey, who maybe you've met, is at OU now. He's a fifth-year student.
Okay.
And he's donating the entire Fox archive to our OU library's special collections. And we have a really beautiful exhibition that was curated by Joey Stiles, Jim Fox's grandson, that's on display now.
We were just talking about him earlier today.
Didn't Burt Reynolds have a
Burt
Jim
Reynolds
Fox
had
house?
a Jim Fox house for a long time.
The Jim Fox body of work is just wild. It's really incredible. The drawings are unlike anything else I've ever seen.
If you want to see Jim's work, you can go to our website at ncmodernist.org/Fox. Now, Angela, how would you characterize a brutalist building? For the average person that's not an architect, how would they recognize one out in the wild?
So I look for exposed structural elements and building materials, in particular concrete, but sometimes also brick and steel. And brutalist buildings, as they were originally conceived of, aren't really being built today. So if it's a brand new building, it may be brutalist-esque, but it's probably not a capital B brutalist building. These buildings were really built primarily between the 60s and late 70s, maybe a little bit into the early 80s.
And it seemed at the time, because if you go back into the magazines that wrote about these buildings, everybody was so freaking excited. This was the future, and it was going to be fantastic. It seemed like optimism was a great part of brutalism, wasn't it?
Absolutely. Not only could these buildings be built relatively quickly, they could also be built in some cases under budget. They could be built quite large. So there was so much potential, and especially in the US, where our government was rapidly expanding after World War II, there was just so much potential optimism and also, this economical quality to them.
Were there a couple of buildings, Angela, in the beginning of this phase that kind of became famous and started the snowball effect?
Yeah, I think if you're looking in the US and in DC in particular, as we are focusing for the Capitol Brutalism exhibition, Marcel Breuer's Weaver building is a really great example of this. So this was one of the first cast in place concrete buildings that we see in DC, and it really showed the potential of building something quite rapidly, sculpturally, and then again, ultimately on budget, which is very exciting.
And that's the HUD building, right?
Yeah, that's the HUD building, which is there to this day and still quite prominently in the news as sort of a polarizing architectural figure.
Now, Aileen, how did this exhibition come about? When did the two of you start working on it?
Well, Angela was working with our anti-cold photographer, working with our team for a long time. From my perspective, the Building Museum right now, we are super, super focused on the future of American urban environment. And we have an entire Future Cities initiative that we are rolling out. And so to really embed this show, and it's not unusual for us to do a show on an architectural style, but it's such a moment right now when we are constantly, as a nation and regionally, in these conversations about downtowns and downtown revitalization and what to do, to have this emerge and really get centered in that conversation with only more and more relevance as time has gone on, was really a core goal and a core focus.
I know, Aileen, you've had a lot of modernist fans come to see the exhibition. Have the classicists rolled through and hurled insults at the exhibition yet?
Not to my face. Come on. Made behind my back. I think the show is really successful at what it's aiming to do. As a museum, as a cultural institution, as a place for education, we're always looking to engage people in new light, in new ways. Think about it from a different perspective. Get curious. We're never political and we're never putting too hard of a point on something. But I think it's doing exactly what it intended to do, which was to inspire new thinking.
Now, Angela, on one of the exhibitions there is about the Washington metro system, which when it came online, I believe, in the mid-70s, was just something that was astonishing for the world. The cavernous-like construction, all in concrete, and particularly the use of indirect lighting inside gave it this otherworldly experience. So talk a little bit about how that came about.
The metro system is really, I'm so glad you brought it up. It's an interesting example of this brutalist form. So it has some classic brutalist features. It's cast concrete. It's got the coppered ceilings, but many folks also often feel that it has sort of this cathedral-like quality. It has, as you're suggesting, this ethereal lighting. You feel like you're a small person walking in a grand space. And this was really a part of the design intention behind the metro, was to create an inspiring place that really could stand among the great public transit spaces internationally. And it seems quite effective even to this day, 50 years later.
Who was the architect behind that?
Harry Weiss.
Harry Weiss, okay. Out of Chicago, I think.
Yeah, exactly.
And the metro continues to build. In recent years, they've built the extension out to Dulles Airport, which was a long time coming.
Yeah, it's been great to see, too, how, not in every case, but in many cases, there continue to be references to the original Harry Weiss architecture. And so there are, a handful of first metro stops that were designed by Weiss, but as it's expanded through the decades, it's remained, a key part of metro development ethic.
Now, Aileen, in addition to the exhibitions themselves, you also looked at some very noted architects to help make suggestions on how to improve these buildings. Who were the architects that you engaged?
We engaged Jeannie Gang and Studio Gang to reimagine the Forrestal buildings. Brooke Scarpa, I think, reimagined the plans for the Weaver building. I don't remember, Angela, if you remember any others.
Buildus, which is a DC-based firm, actually an Anacostia-based firm, imagined a temple for play for the Humphrey building. Something we were really excited about, too, is that for the Hirshhorn reimagining, Diller, Scafidi, and Renfro allowed us to use their concept for the Hirshhorn bubble, which was an actual concept that nearly got built before it was killed, I think primarily to budgetary concerns. And
what is the Hirshhorn bubble? I got to know now.
Oh, do you know the Hirshhorn bubble project?
No, I don't, but I want to know. Tell me.
Wild.
It is wild. And I hope everybody listening will Google it. And then I really hope they'll go visit the exhibition if they're a local or nearby the DC area. So this is pretty fantastical. It's actually called a seasonal inflatable bubble designed by Diller, Scafidi, and Renfro in 2009 and developed until about 2013 when the project was ultimately killed. And the idea was that the Hirshhorn, it's a large concrete cylinder that's hollow in the center and 4 stories tall. And so the seasonal inflatable bubble would be inflated. It would only take, a few hours, less than a day to inflate the thing. And it would actually bubble out the top of that hollow center. Yeah. And then it would create an indoor sort of performance space, auxiliary space for the Hirshhorn, which has through the years been space constrained, especially for hosting large events.
It looks like a hockey puck with an egg sitting on top.
There are these great renderings of the bubble shining bright blue in the night, sort of lighting up the national malls.
That is really cool. What else did the architects come up with as far as improvements?
One of the all the concepts are great and unique on their own, but a really great one is Studio Gang's concept for the Forrestal building. So since Forrestal building was built, it's been pretty controversial for crossing over 10th Street and actually blocking views from L'Enfant Plaza to the National Mall. And what they do is they actually remove that controversial portion of the building and then suggest repurposing the window panels because they're sort of like Lego bricks into facades for newly developed housing. So that's a great reuse concept. But then it also creates new public space right adjacent to the mall. And they suggest using wood to reclad the sides of that Forrestal facade. And so that kind of softens the building, introduces more light on those sort of capped ends, and then creates more public space, just more vibrancy and a softening of the facade overall.
Aileen, the exhibition has really gotten a lot of publicity. Has that surprised you?
I'd love to say no, but the caliber of the exhibition, the timeliness of it, and the way that Angela's scholarship and then I think Ty's imagery really hit the mark with this full-scale sort of opportunity to be a visitor in the nation's capital, come into the museum, learn something about what you're seeing and these things you've always known, and then go and then reimagine it and go back out and experience it differently. It really has this we kind of knew it had great legs beyond engagement, but I do think that the broader public interest, we were used to seeing our architectural friends and our AEC industry folks and our graduate level students coming through here, but just many, many just interesting design enthusiasts, tourists, just general travelers really being interested in it, I think is really exciting for us. And I think it's exciting. It should be exciting for all of us that, I think we're living in a moment where maybe people are starting to understand the power of design on their daily lives in a new way.
In our area, when we have people who really intensely dislike modernism, we try to get them into the buildings as much as possible.
Yeah.
Is there any way that the public can access some of these buildings and see them for themselves?
It's a great question. The museum often does hard hat tours and interesting that sell out immediately of really interesting, cool places. And you're right. There's nothing like just boots on the ground, right? Experiencing it for yourself. I mean, it would be in and of itself would make a fabulous walking tour. Actually, George, if you want to come down and develop that and deliver that for us, that'd be
okay.
Great.
I might take that down.
There are a few that you can get into. One is the Hirshhorn.
Right.
You can also visit the Metro and hopefully ride the Metro. And then another thing that we learned when we were actually working on the exhibition, and Aileen mentioned Ty. So Ty Cole is a co-curator of the exhibition with me and an amazing architectural photographer. So he actually got into the FBI building, and anybody you can sign up for a tour And we worked with them so that he could photograph the FBI building. So you can also tour that one. I'm not sure it will make you fall in love with it, but you can certainly see behind the scenes.
So what are the two of you hearing as far as the future of some of these buildings? President Trump has had a target on these for quite a while. There's talk about destroying them. There's talk about just selling them, definitely moving away from federal ownership of these things. What's happening with these buildings?
Well, I will say in DC, because I've been a part of some of these task force and plannings, and I sit on the board of our downtown bid and all of those things. There have been some really great kind of the 7 big ideas that led by our wonderful task force folks in the mayor's office to really think about what are these properties that, and many of them are inclusive of his buildings, that are sitting there, that are vacant, that are underutilized. How can we reimagine them? And that's in the plan for some of these. I mean, I'm not advocating that every one of these buildings can or should be saved, but some could possibly be reimagined for the uses that we desperately need right now around density, around housing affordability, around mixed use. And so I think at the end of the day, all of us are aligned in wanting to make our nation's capital vibrant and beautiful. So whatever that may mean, I'd like to think we're all going to come together to imagine the best uses of these buildings.
Angela, my last question. Tell me about your forthcoming Renegades book.
Ooh. Oh, I'm really glad to talk about the Renegades book. So a few years ago, this comes back to that American School of Architecture piece that I mentioned earlier. We curated an exhibition that looked at this history of design education under the leadership of Goff Green and others. And what these folks were doing was they were really thinking about how do you train architects in the US to be resourceful and experimental at a time when, we've been talking about modernism and particularly brutalism. A lot of folks thought, oh, that all kind of looks the same. Well, if you're familiar with the work of Bruce Goff, no 2 buildings ever look the same. He was not afraid to use goose down feathers and 5-cent ashtrays in his work, and his students were quite resourceful too. And so the Renegades book actually has hundreds of beautiful photographs, drawings, and really documents this amazing period in time.
Well, we'll have to have you back on to talk about the book.
Would love to, yeah.
The website for the National Building Museum is N as in Nancy, B as in boy, M as in museum.org. Right, Aileen?
Exactly, that's right, nbm.org.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having us. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, so fun.
Brooke and Zach Davis invested over $460,000 to replace their existing 750 square foot California home with a 2,000 square foot modular house from Connect Homes. They paid a huge deposit which covered demolition and site preparation costs, expecting to move into their new home by Thanksgiving of 2024. However, in January 2025, the company they'd contracted with, Connect Homes, filed for liquidation. George visited Connect Homes years ago and was impressed by their manufacturing plant in San Bernardino. However, prefab is a tough industry. Connect Homes struggled with manufacturing issues, high turnover, and failed contracts. Now, the Davises and other customers are seeking legal action to recover their money, leaving the Davises without a home. Here's George's conversation with Brooke and Zach.
Brooke and Zach, you have gotten some publicity lately, probably not the kind that you would like to get, for being out of luck with a home project. When did this all start? When did you decide you were going to embark on this adventure?
2021. Well, we'd been thinking about it. We bought our property knowing that the housing that was on the property was not going to be sufficient for the family that we planned to have. And then as our family grew, it became more and more apparent that we needed to do something fairly dramatic to increase the number of bedrooms and spaces for all of us.
How many are you now? I mean, are we talking like 8, 10, 15?
We're 5 and a very large dog.
Wow. Okay. So 6 beings in a space. Got it.
Yes. So 2021 was when we realized we better get started, given how long it takes to build, basically. So that's when we started looking around to see what options were out there. And pretty quickly, we identified that the 750 square foot, the primary house on the property, was not salvageable. There was just no value in a remodel or an expansion. So then we switched gears and started looking at what kind of building from scratch would look like.
And what companies did you look at most closely in your decision process?
Gosh, yeah, it's been a while, so I can't remember all of them, but I think at that point, Dwell Magazine was covering kind of this modular prefab idea pretty heavily, and I found a list of, 5 or 8, but pretty quickly it turned out that most of them were not actually producing a product beyond kind of the concept level or demos.
It's like vaporware for the software industry, right?
Yeah, kind of like that. I mean, it may have been that they had high aspirations and they just, wanted to show what they would do if they had all the resources. But we needed somebody that was actually building homes. So I think there was, I'm going to butcher the name, but it was like DVELL. That was one. I did reach out to them, but pretty quickly Connect Homes emerged as the one that had houses that we could see, like we could visit and look at, and that was pretty encouraging.
We've had the Connect Home guys, the founders and the CEO on the show. I think this was around 2021, about that same time. I visited their factory, which was then in San Bernardino, walked through. Most impressive organization, right? I assume you guys visited one of their locations.
Yeah, there was actually the model that we wanted to build had been built already in our county. So we sort of tried really hard to get those people during COVID to let us into their house and talk to them about their experience. And they did. They let us walk through and they had a great experience. So we walked through the model we wanted to build in the county that we were building in and decided it seemed like a good plan.
And this kind of modular construction, you can still modify, right? It doesn't have to just come out of the factory one way. So you can make decisions about how it looks.
Yeah, there's some flexibility. The floor plan is pretty much set, as far as where the rooms are, staircases, even things like where the refrigerator is going to go. That level of modification isn't possible. But because of the way these steel frames support the structure within these open bays kind of the steel frame, you can do whatever you want. So windows, doors, you can pretty much put those wherever you want. And then all the finishes, siding, interior paint, tile, fixtures, cabinetry finishes, all of that, which was a good fit for us because I think we liked the idea of having, some hand and some ownership of the design of the house, but there's no way we could have handled all the millions of decisions that go into starting, completely from scratch with a custom home.
I think a lot of people believe that prefab, when you order it, it's like ordering something from Amazon. A truck just delivers it and it shows up on the site, but it's not quite that simple, is it? What do you have to do to get ready for the house to come?
We spent a year designing the house. So there was a lot of choices to make as far as where the windows and the doors and I don't know.
Yeah, there was a lot to design, a lot of decisions to make on the house itself. And then all the usual stuff that you have to do with building a house. So making sure that you meet the setback requirements. So there was some question about, whether we were 20 feet back from the center of the road or 20 feet back from the edge of it's not a real road. It's just a right of way. So, just all those things that you have to figure out. And then civil engineering, stormwater management, the whole foundation, engineering the foundation, parking.
Yeah.
All the usual requirements that have to be met to submit a plan set to a municipality for approval.
So we spent a year on the design and then a year on the permitting.
So 2 years in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then what happens?
So as soon as we got the permits, almost within a day, we basically just turned around and said, all right, we're ready to go. Send us the purchase agreement. And we signed the purchase agreement and put down the first payment and
demoed our house.
And
destroyed your house. Yes, that's leap of faith.
And then, we were kind of off and running. And really, there wasn't a whole lot at that point for us to do. So we were working with a local general contractor on all the site prep, building the foundation, all the utility hookups, those sorts of things. There was a little bit of communication back and forth between our contractor and Connect Homes, the builder, as things were kind of little questions came up here and there that needed to be ironed out. But for the most part, everybody knew what they were doing because the plans were set. All the questions had been answered. And so we were just we'd moved out and we were just waiting.
And so the new house doesn't just roll up onto the property. I guess it has to be craned down on top of your foundation that you've built?
Yes.
Yes.
We kind of left that part out. So it's not a super easy delivery, especially depending on where you are. So we're on a fairly small, I referenced a road, but like I said, it's really more of a right of way. It is paved, but it's narrow and there's trees and things. So we had to work with Connect Homes to come up with a delivery plan. And ultimately it involved us licensing part of our neighbor's property so that we could create a crane pad that spanned both the properties, as well as sort of a runway or an off-ramp for the trucks that have these 40-foot container, basically like a shipping container style module, but they're even taller. So a runway for the trucks to kind of exit and park, and then the crane could lift those off. So that all that work had to be done as well and get set up.
So how much money are you in for at this point?
Well, what were we, around 280-ish for all the site work? And then over the course of the first half of 2024, we made 3 payments to Connect Homes. So $460,000 to them, and then there was an additional about $15,000 prior to the contract that we spent on design services.
So I don't have my HP 12C handy, but that's a lot of money so far. Yeah.
Yes.
Now, when did you first sort of suspect something was going wonky?
For me, it was when they moved factories, but hadn't told us or disclosed that. And then they sounded like they were expanding from San Bernardino to Mesa.
In Arizona, right?
Yeah, Mesa, Arizona. And then we found out they were closing the San Bernardino factory. And so we originally, when we signed our contract, that's where we thought our house would be built in San Bernardino, since we live in Northern California.
Yeah.
That was the only factory at that time.
Yeah, that
was the first weird thing that happened.
Yeah.
What was the second weird thing that happened?
There was a lot of future weird things that happened.
2021, obviously, we're kind of emerging from COVID. That was still all, I think, kind of fresh in our minds. And just the fact that communication had changed. There'd been, supply chain hiccups. And they kind of referred to that when we were first started our conversations, like we say we're going to be able to deliver at this point, but, things happen. We all know this. So I think we were maybe not as sufficiently, skeptical or
we're pretty trusting,
critical as we should have been. But in retrospect, the communication just got progressively worse to the point where it became unclear to us whether any progress was being made on our house in the factory, and we had no real visibility into it. One of the things that they had promised was that we could tour the factory and see our house when it was in production. So that kind of became a refrain for us. When should we schedule the tour? Because we'll need to fly to Arizona. And my sister happens to live about 10 minutes from the warehouse or factory that they had there. So, it would have been a great opportunity to see family and
couldn't you
tour.
just send her over as a spy and check it out for you?
Unfortunately, we didn't think about that until it was too late. But in retrospect, yes, that would have made a lot of sense. Because as we started to ask, they would kind of talk past or respond sort of past this question, the specific question of when should we come visit? And then as we got to the point where we were expecting to have a final site visit, our site was ready to go. Our contractor had finished. Foundation was sitting there ready to have a house dropped on it. And we were just not getting responses.
Well, so our site was ready in June, which was the original delivery time that they had told us. But then
we received it wouldn't have ultimately been the last invoice if everything had gone according to plan. But the last invoice that we received was at the beginning of July, and we made that payment July 10th. And then on July 31st, we got an email from our project manager, and then that was it. Things went quiet. Nothing. We'd been expecting a site visit. We'd been told the second week of August. I should say the reason we were pushed back was because they said that the initial steel frames that they received for our house didn't pass quality control. And so they had to be sent back to a third party that was producing them. So that was why we were delayed. And then things just went quiet.
So when did you get the really bad news that they were in some sort of financial trouble?
Yeah, so that's interesting because it was mid-August, maybe second or third week of August. First, we got a text from our project manager, which was the first time we'd ever gotten a text. And it said, I was furloughed without notice. I haven't had access to my email or any of my contacts. And I'm now being told that I'm about to be returned to work. And then a couple days later, or maybe it was even later that day, we got it wasn't addressed to us. It was a kind of boilerplate Dear Client email. And it started, I believe, you may have heard about the financial challenges that Connect Homes has been facing. We had not heard.
You had not heard about that?
No. So, yeah, that was...
And it said, we've resumed operations and there will be no delays. But our house was already super delayed from when they told us that they would deliver it. So...
Yeah.
About how many homeowners do you think were affected by all this that had projects in process?
Okay, so we've since seen the liquidation paper. Mm-hmm. And I thought it was going to be a large amount of clients based on the no communication from the company for us specifically. But it turns out there was 4 homes in production.
Okay.
Us being one of 3 other people. And I believe there's 14 clients that had given money and don't have a product. And that equated to about $5 million in money that the company took from the 14 people.
So of those 4 homes, were any of them like a work in process? Were they partially built somewhere?
That's the question.
That is a question. Yeah, in theory, there are 4 homes in some state of completion in a warehouse in Arizona. The landlords are owed over $1 million in back rent. And it's hard to know if we will get access or find out if our house is in there. We're working really hard to try to figure that out and try to find out if there's anything of value that we can take possession of. But it's also kind of complicated in that because of the way these things work, anything less than a full 6 modules. I mean, they could not necessarily be complete, but there has to be all 6 of them because it's like a puzzle where if not all the pieces are there, it's just doesn't really have much value.
I guess it's time now to send your sister over to be the spy.
Actually, some clients, some other people in a similar situation as us, have gone there and like videotaped through the window to try to find their modules.
And there are some that visible.
Some modules have been done, but we don't know who they are or how complete they are, or if there's like, we had 6 modules in the house we were designing. There's another person that also had 6 modules. And then one person has 4 modules, but you can't really distinguish between the modules very easily, I think.
Yeah.
Are you guys banding together to try to address this? I mean, what's your plan at this point?
Well, the Santa Cruz County DA is doing a lot of work right now to try to help people that have been affected by this. So that's a positive. One of the clients has a lawyer. Their lawyers sometimes are able to get some information. But for us, like the real challenge is if there is something of value in the factory that will help us, we just need that information so that we can move forward knowing that. And it's hard to know if we're going to have to stick build something and start over. We just need to know. We don't have all the information we need to make our next step is the challenge.
What seems to be pretty clear is that there's not a path to extract some sum of money that's going to come anywhere near to making any of the clients whole from all of this. It looked like the company had $100 million in
close to $100 million in debt,
in secured debt, and we're unsecured. So and there's no way that they have assets that are going to cover what they owe. So the legal channels don't offer much hope. Really, I think our best bet is that there's something of value in terms of a home in some state of completion that we can gain access to. Otherwise, we will switch gears and move to stick building. Using the same plans or using the same design, we'll have to get new plans drawn, obviously, and the house will need to be re-engineered for wood frame instead of steel. But to not lose what we've paid in permitting fees, we'll keep the design.
Right. I mean, I would think that there's some sort of creditors somewhere that you could approach, make them an offer. I mean, you could pay them some amount of money, even if it was nominal, because they're trying to get their money and you're trying to get your house.
That would make a lot of sense. So the way this, and I'm neither an architect nor a lawyer, but the way that I understand this works is the company has transferred all the assets to a separate LLC that's in charge of liquidating the assets and then returning whatever cash is generated to the secured creditors. And that LLC has apparently not been responsive. The communication is almost non-existent. There's a website where we can fill out a form as a creditor, as an unsecured creditor, and that's pretty much it. Lawyers for other customers that were affected have made the offer that you described of, hey, these modules probably have zero value to anyone but my client.
Right.
And we're just not getting much in the way of response.
I see. Okay.
We were able to get zero updates on any progress on our home during this period when they were apparently in operation. And then they shuttered again in September, and that was it. Once we got into September, there were 4 to 6 emails from the CEO saying, I'm working on a deal, things like, I should know by Monday, or...
And we'll resume production right away.
Yeah. More information to follow. And then there would be no follow-up. And then 4 or 6 weeks later, there'd be another email like that. But the company that was created, that apparently is now trying to purchase the assets, was created in October. I don't know.
Well, I am so sorry for what you all have to go through, because, this is the kind of stuff that, you hope it doesn't ever happen to you, but you read about it happening to other people. And, such a struggle, both financially and emotionally, to not be able to follow through with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So where are you living now? I assume you're not living in the foundation of your new house. I mean, where are you hanging out every day?
We're renting about 6 miles down the road.
Yeah. A little farther from all our kids' activities, but yeah, we're not homeless, so that's good.
That is good. That would be a real problem.
You know what else is sort of interesting that I feel like your listeners may be interested in? So when this happened, we tried to go through different government agencies to figure out, is there someone that can help us with this situation? And so one was the Department of Housing and Community Development. So they looked into the matter, and we didn't know this when we decided to build our house this way, but manufactured housing is different. There's manufactured housing and factory built housing. And so Connect Homes is factory built housing. And so that's under a different jurisdiction than manufactured housing, which is also different than stick-built housing. And so when bad things happen, there's different laws that are very specific to whatever type of housing you choose to build.
Yeah.
And factory-built housing is newer. And so the legislation, I feel like, hasn't really caught up yet. So when we were trying to get someone to help us, they said, well, if this was manufactured housing, we could help you. But since it's factory built housing, that's not within our jurisdiction. And actually, factory built housing only has jurisdiction if there's something wrong with the actual build, like if the frames are faulty or something.
Like a warranty issue.
Yeah.
But for this, it's just in this black hole of of no government regulation.
Yeah. Yeah, it seems like for stick built, there's some pretty specific rules. Like you're not allowed to take money, that was whatever intended for lumber and then turn around and use it to pay your HR person. I mean,
Right.
Obviously that happens, but it's as a line item, it's profit and overhead. And we get those bills from our GC and they're, it's really clearly laid out like where our dollars are going. On the manufactured housing side, they call them mobile homes, I think is what they've been referred to for a long time. I think there's a lot of protections around those because they can be lower priced. There's a lot of elderly that live in manufactured homes. There's a lot of vulnerable populations that need to be protected. And I think there's been a lot of work done in our state and probably in lots of states. But yeah, the factory built housing piece, it's kind of the Wild West. And it seems like a lot of the laws that would have protected and would have applied don't in this case.
Yeah.
Well, please keep me posted on what happens with this. And if you can get any more information and just the progress of all this, because I'd love to do a follow-up story on it.
Thanks.
Yeah, we'd be happy to. It's unfortunate because I really do feel like it is an innovative way to build. The things like energy efficiency, resource efficiency, speed, value, those were really attractive. The design.
The designs are great. I mean, I saw their manufacturing facility in San Bernardino, was really impressed.
Yeah. We like the design. We like the amount of windows and light that we were going to be able to have, especially now with the wildfires in California. I mean, there's so much need for a lot of housing in our state that can be built quickly and in a scalable way. This seems like the type of building that would be a good fit. It's unfortunate that this company couldn't figure it out.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. Thank you.
That was my conversation with Brooke and Zach Davis. Madeleine Peyroux moved to Paris with her mother at 13, and at 16 began performing with street musicians in the Latin Quarter, eventually joining groups like the Riverboat Shufflers and the Lost Wandering Blues and Jazz Band, with whom she toured Europe. Her debut album, Dreamland, featured covers of songs from the 30s and 40s, and the next album, Careless Love, went gold and had the single Don't Wait Too Long that helped her top the jazz radio charts. Her newest album, Let's Walk, features 10 songs that she wrote. Welcome, Madeleine.
Hi, George.
So you grew up in Athens, Georgia, right? A good Southern girl?
No, I'm not a good Southern girl. I'm sorry. I was born there, but I really don't come from anywhere now. I've moved so many times and lived in so many places that I don't have that kind of connection. But I mean, I'm trying to discover the South a little bit now, ever since I read this book, South to America by Madeleine Peyroux. It's a pretty interesting idea that the South has basically got a central influence over the whole American culture that we don't often want to talk about, probably because a lot of us want to pretend that we can be separate from it. We can forget about it.
So where are you living now most of the time?
Upstate New York.
Okay. Very different than the South, I guess.
Well, it's cooler.
Yeah.
But it's still part of the American legacy. I don't know how different it is, really.
Your story about moving as a teenager to France with your mom sounds like a Hallmark movie. But it didn't work out so great initially, did it? What happened?
I suppose when you say it's a Hallmark movie because we left and moved to Paris.
Yes, that kind of romanticism of mother and daughter moving
The end.
there.
Right. If you tell the story and you don't really tell the story, you just sort of base it on stereotypes, then yeah. But we're humans. We're fallible, right? My parents had just divorced. My father was still drinking horribly. There was a lot of violence in our earlier lives. And when we moved there, my mom became a single parent without any time to spend with myself and my brother. And so we went from being latchkey kids with an alcoholic father to being latchkey kids without an alcoholic father, and without all that violence, but in a country where we didn't speak the language, we didn't understand the television, we didn't have a lot of social connections. So it was a big transition, and I was a teenager, and teenagers are just basically horrible people. And I was. I mean, if they are, I was a real teenager. So I was terrible. And I left home pretty soon. And then after a while of running away from boarding school and dropping out of a few high schools, all within the space of about a year and a half, my mother said, listen, if you don't go to school, you can't stay here. And then I took her up on it, basically, and I left. Yeah. And she was devastated by that. So it was really hard for her. But I met a man from upstate New York, who's actually from this town where I live, Kingston, who had started a street band and had been doing it for a couple decades by then. And I said, Danny, you got to let me sing in your band. And he said, oh, yeah? Well, you have to audition first. I said, okay. He said, go ahead. I said, wait, what do you mean? There's only the two of us. We're standing out in the rain on a sidewalk. I don't have a guitar. I don't know how to play my songs anyway, but I didn't tell him all of that. I just said, really, now? And he was just like, so I said, Jeepers, creepers, where get those peepers? And I performed the whole song, snapping my fingers. And then he didn't smile at all. Finally, the song was over. And he said, okay, you're in the band. And I couldn't believe it. But that's what happened. I joined this band. I really lucked out when I met Danny Fitzgerald. Lost Wandering Blues and Jazz Band from New York City.
So you didn't move to Paris originally to sing. Your family moved there for another reason, I guess.
My mother was in love with France and had been a French literature student and a French language teacher. She got a job offer in Paris. And so it was a way for her to start a new life after a very long, torturous marriage.
Torturous marriage, yeah. The first song we're going to hear today is Dance Me to the End of Love. It was written by Leonard Cohen, first in 1984 on his album Various Positions. And though it presents itself as a love song, it's really deeply rooted in the Holocaust. Cohen said that it was about the reality of string quartets being compelled to perform in the Nazi death camps. That provided a haunting backdrop to the atrocities that were occurring there. Here's Madeleine with Dance Me to the End of Love.
Dance me to your beauty with a burning violin. Dance me through the panic till I'm gathered safely in. Lift me like an olive branch and be my homeward dove. Dance me to the end of love. Dance me to the end of love. Let me see your beauty when the witnesses are gone. Let me feel you moving like they do in Babylon. Show me slowly what I only know the limits of. Dance me to the end of love. Dance me to the end of love. Dance me to the wedding now. Dance me on and on. Dance me very tenderly and dance me very long. We're both of us beneath our love. We're both of us above. Dance me to the end of love. Dance me to the end of love. the children who are asking to be born. Dance me through the curtains that our kisses have outworn. Raise a tent of shelter now, though every thread is torn. Dance me to the end of love. Dance me to the end of love. Dance me to your beauty with a burning violin. Dance me through the panic till I'm gathered safely in. Touch me with your naked hand. Touch me with your glove. Dance me to the end of love. Dance me to the end of love. Dance me to the end of love.
That's really beautiful, Madeleine. I cue that up quite frequently at home when I want to just kind of chill out. It's just a gorgeous rendition of that song you do.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, that was Larry Klein and I have found a very special place together that he carved out for my voice, and I presented to him with my interpretations of these songs. Actually, when I started working with Larry, he sent me a book basically of Leonard Cohen lyrics and said, just see what you can do with any of these. So I learned a bunch of them. And Dance Me was on the record that I had heard in the 1980s. I was in Paris when I discovered him, Leonard Cohen. I also loved the next record that he put out when it first came out. That's when I really got excited. I'm Your Man, I think it's called. And it's got First We Take Manhattan on it.
Yes.
Everybody Knows, I think, is on it. It's a really amazing record.
I remember when Jennifer Warnes came out with Famous Blue Raincoat, which were all Leonard Cohen songs. Gorgeous album. Came out in 86, I think. She used to tour with Leonard Cohen, so it's a complete album of all his songs. It kind of cemented her in the pantheon of Cohen followers. If you ever get a chance, I think it's online on YouTube.
Okay.
Tell me about your new album, Let's Walk.
Let's Walk is the title track of an album of 10 songs that I co-wrote with John Harrington and co-produced with John Harrington and Elliot Shiner. The songs are some of the things that I needed to really get into, and they, I think, are mostly about America or about the human condition in these times. I feel that it's more contemporary than any other record I've made.
And you wrote all the songs yourself, which is new for you, right?
It's not actually the first time that I tried that, but it is the second time.
Okay. How do you find inspiration for the songs? Are you a person that takes a few bars and works with it for weeks, or does it hit you kind of all at once? I've heard it both ways from composers.
Well, I believe that it is both ways. I've had different experiences. The title track of Let's Walk are lyrics that I woke up with. I had the whole thing figured out, but I think I'd gone to bed wondering how I could string that many syllables with the exact meter and length and all that. It's like the first line is, let us advance our mortal bodies up where hearts and minds will go. And every lyric has that exact length. And I woke up with it the next morning with those lyrics in my head. I wrote them down. And then I sent them to John with a little demo of the sound of the call and response that I imagined. And I only had a 2-note melody. So I had let's walk, and then I had in unison, let's walk let's walk, let's walk, let's roll, let's roll, but it had to be an octave lower, so it had to be men's voices. So I used a strange app to make my voice drop an octave, which sounded horrible and haunting. And I sent that anyway. I sent that to John, just, you'll get the idea. And John didn't respond for about 3 days. I was worried because I just thought, gosh, this means a lot to me, but he probably doesn't like it. I don't know, it's too simple, or I don't know what's wrong with it, but he hasn't said anything. And after 3 days, I get an email with an attachment that is a recording of him playing all the instruments and singing all the harmony parts and doing the entire song with all of the lyrics. And it's pretty much exactly the way we ended up doing it. And when I heard it, I just cried. I thought, this is perfect. And I just called him and I left him a voicemail saying, this is perfect. It just depends. I mean, that ended up being the title track. And it's a very moving song. But I wouldn't say that it was easier, because I think it was a product of, that rumination that everybody has, where you're working on something in the back of your mind,
From the title track of her new album, here's Madeleine with Let's Walk.
I want the world to know. The world. I want the world to know. I want the world to know. The world. I want the world to know.
Let's walk.
Let's walk. Let's walk. Let's walk.
Let's roll.
Let's roll. Let's roll. Let's roll.
Let us advance our mortal bodies up where our hearts and minds will go. Let's lead.
Let's lead. Let's lead. Let's lead.
And behold.
Behold. Behold. Behold.
Progress within the peaceful test of power, growing as we go. You reap.
You reap. You reap. You reap.
What you sow.
What you sow. What you sow. What you sow.
We keep our deepest love at hand, and never shall we let it go. Let's walk,
Let's walk. Let's walk. Let's walk.
let's roll.
Let's roll. Let's roll. Let's roll.
You are the people of my heart and soul. I want the Let's walk. Let's walk. Let's walk. Let's walk. Let's roll. Let's roll. Let's roll. Let's roll. You are the people of my heart and soul. Let's walk. Let's roll. Let's roll. Let's roll. Let's roll. Tell everybody that let's togetherness. Let's roll. Let's togetherness. Let's walk. Let's walk. Let's come on. Come on. Let's roll. I want the world to know. Let's walk. Let's walk. Let's
Madeleine, a fun thing from your bio, I noticed that you're a Groucho Marx fan. So what's your favorite Groucho Marx film?
Well, I love the Marx Brothers movies pretty much equally. But I think the one that really is haunting is the one where there's a war at the end. There's a big musical number at the end. And I think that one is Duck Soup, but I haven't gotten a chance to check. But I try to quote them all the time. I mean, there's, I think Night at the Opera is the one where Groucho says to Chico, we've got to sign a contract. And Groucho says, the party of the first part shall heretofore be known as the party of the first part. And Chico says, I don't know. And he says, okay, we'll get rid of that one. Okay, the party of the second part shall heretofore be known as the party of the second part. Chico says, I don't like that one either. And they go down and keep ripping the thing apart. And then by the end of it, he's got a tiny sliver of paper. And he says, all right, now we're done. And he says, well, wait a minute. Chico says, what is that? He goes, oh, you don't have to worry about that. That's in every contract. It's just a sanity clause. He says, you can't fool me. I know there's no such thing as sanity clause.
You know, these movies are now almost 100 years old. Some of them, and they're just still gems. I was on a binge about 10 years ago watching, Groucho Marx movies with his brothers, and they were pretty fantastic. Most of them held up, I think.
Well, which ones didn't? What did you see that didn't hold up? I thought everything was just brilliant. I mean, there's some jokes that are hard to follow, perhaps, some references, and it was all vaudeville.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like what's great about the Marx Brothers movies is that not only are they brilliant, but they have a historical value as what vaudeville used to be. Mm-hmm. And we don't have a lot of that in other movies later on. The movies that were being made at that time were trying to be more Hollywood and big, and musicals were all big budget and
Busby Berkeley dance numbers kind of things. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And, there was other kinds of movies, but the Marx Brothers movies were records. They were like making a record of a show that you'd been playing for years. And they're just brilliant. I mean, but the one-liners, Groucho's one-liner zingers are endless.
Yes.
I mean, even the songs that he wrote, he played ukulele. They all played instruments incredibly well. Groucho would sing songs like Potawatomi, you're a pot of me, mm-hmm. and Lydia the Tattooed Lady, or one of my favorites is, hello, I must be going. I came to say I cannot stay, I must be going. I'll stay a week or two. I'll stay the summer through, but I am telling you, I must be going.
That was the theme song from You Bet Your Life, his game show, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been fun, Madeleine. Thank you so much for talking with me.
Thank you so much too, George.
Thanks for listening. U.S. Modernist Radio is underwritten by the Budman family, restoring significant architecture in Toronto, Los Angeles, Malibu, and Palm Springs.
Visit usmodernist.org's massive archives to listen to past shows, discover documentation of 25,000 significant modernist houses, and access 5 million pages of classic 20th century architecture magazines. U.S. Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl, with guest research by Bobby Morris. Conscientious is her middle name, or it could be Clara. We really don't know. U.S. Modernist Radio is a production of Modernist Archive Incorporated, a nonprofit educational archive for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guile. George and I'll be back soon with another realistically priced edition of U.S. Modernist Radio.